The show is a proud member of the Retirement Podcast Network. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. Steve Jobs. Well, hey there. Welcome to the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but to have the confidence, because you're doing the work, to really lean in and rock retirement. Today, we are going to have Dr. Daniel Crosby on the show, author of The Soul of Wealth. It is a wonderful book. We'll have links to it in our 6-Shot Saturday, a great gift. Every chapter is a little vignette or essay on a particular subject related to wealth, not just from the financial sense, but from the inner sense. And today, we're going to talk with Dr. Daniel Crosby about one of his chapters titled, Learn What to Ignore. This is a really important skill when it comes to life, but when it comes to retirement planning in general. It's a new domain, and you definitely want to build some confidence in your retirement planning chops, even if you're working with an advisor. The more informed you are, the better you're going to extract value from that advisor. And obviously, if you're doing this on your own, you want to build up that skill set. The desire to build up that skill set probably leads you to listen to a podcast like this, or read a book, or hire somebody, but you want to be careful because nobody knows exactly how to do this. It is not a complicated problem that's just easily solved by one formula or one spreadsheet or one software tool. This is a complex problem that is many faceted. And it's easy for you, just like it's easy for me when I'm looking at a new domain, to go to the experts. That's a reasonable thing to do, to build some competence. But we can't abdicate our trust in ourselves of what's the right path for us, what fits us. Because there are so many different ways to build a retirement plan that is feasible and resilient. There are so many different ways to do many things. So just because you see one person's iteration of it doesn't mean that that fits you. Their situation is totally different than yours. Just like a particular expert, and some would call me an expert in retirement planning, I don't have the way. I can help you build your competence, but don't think I can figure this all out, or anybody can. This is where it comes down to trusting your inner voice. And that can be hard to do when you're in a domain that's a little bit scary. There's a balance between there. You want to leverage people like me to inform the process that you use to make decisions for yourself. But you don't want to over-depend on people like me. You don't want to over-depend on anyone else. The one you want to depend on most for the judgment calls is you, because your entire life experience, practically and business and in finance and professionally, but also your life experience, your preferences, your fears, your desires, what motivates you, is integrated into those judgment calls. So trust yourself. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. You're more capable than you likely admit to yourself. All right, with that said, today what we're going to do is we're going to chat with Dr. Daniel Crosby on Learn What to Ignore. In addition to that, we're going to have a chat with Dr. Bobby DuBois about what is your style of receiving information, because that's important in the health domain, so you can find the voices that connect with how you think about your health journey, so you have the energy to show up. He created a little quiz, or a quiz, that will help you put some labels to that to hopefully improve your health outcomes. Before we get started, a couple of announcements. Number one is Retirement Plan Live, our live case study, starts in January. And we're focusing on a single person that does not have children. But the twist this year is I made a decision. I've never done this before. We'll see how it goes. Is we're actually going to have two subjects that are you're going to hear every week. We're going to have a gentleman who doesn't have children and is not married. But we're also going to have another subject, a female with no children, not married. And each week they're going to share the same part of the journey as I tease out the information we need to work on the vision and having a feasible plan. So we're going to have two people, a man and a woman. So honestly, as I record this, I haven't figured out, I guess we're going to have two results episodes. We're going to have two so we can focus on the man and then we can focus on the woman separately. So stay tuned in how we figure that out. And no doubt Nicole is already turning the dials in her head to help me achieve that. Second quick announcement is there'll be some changes in the show for 2025. The show is going to be hopefully tighter, more focused on retirement, and always having a point of some little baby step you can take. And I want to make sure when we answer questions that we empower somebody to do something and not just simply talk about the potential answers to a subject. So we're going to try to close the aperture, get more focused, because you don't need to be an expert in retirement planning. You need to build up a level of competence and you need to take action. Life is not what we talk about, it's what we do. With that said, let's get to Dr. Daniel Crosby. So now we're bringing back, I think this is the second month in a row, Dr. Daniel Crosby, the award-winning whatever you are. What are you, by the way?
The thought leader of the year, Roger, please.
Is that what it says on the award?
That's what the plaque says.
That's what it says. Side story, Nicole Rockstar Mills, who is our COO, her husband works for a large company. He gets lots of awards. And she was getting frustrated because he had all these plaques. So for her birthday, we got her an award. So now she has something. It's rock star-ish.
That's awesome.
But anyway, I want to dovetail off of my conversation with Michael Easter last week on Gear Not Stuff and talk about one of your chapters in your book, The Soul of Wealth, which is an amazing book. We'll have links to it in Six Shot Saturday. Any chapter you could expand to in its own book if you wanted to, right? It's that type of wisdom.
Right.
And talk about learning what to ignore. So before I get into this with you, I firmly believe, especially in the domain of retirement planning, but in humanity, for someone to thrive as a human, there are two superpowers that we're going to have to master. One is learning what to ignore, because the speed in which trash or information comes at us is overwhelming now, even before AI gets really going. And then the second superpower, which is related, is the ability to focus. And that makes me think of Cal Newport, his book, Deep Work, which I'm a big fan of him. And so your chapter on learn what to ignore, I think, is critical if you want to, in our vernacular, rock retirement, have a great life. Why did you write this chapter?
Well, because I'm in deep agreement with you about the currency of our attention and how it's being pulled on in negative ways. So, Roger, I came across a stat. It's been probably 15 years ago, but even 15 years ago, it's gotten worse since then. A Google executive said the volume of information that was created from the year 0 to the year 2000, we now exceed every 2 days in the internet economy. And so everyone's a creator now. AI is going to hasten that even more. And so, yeah, we just live in a world where we are utterly unprepared for the volume of information that's going to be coming our way. Most of it completely inconsequential to anything that would pass for, something that would matter to living a meaningful existence. Much of it designed to either scam you or get you to buy something, or to mislead you or to try and get you to vote for someone. So it's a wild world out there, and our brains are candidly not prepared for it because it's just such a new phenomenon.
So when I think about rocking retirement from an organizational standpoint, we created 4 pillars of how you should organize your planning. And first, what do I want? Who do I want to be when I grow up? Which is the question you talked about before we got on. And that question never goes away if you don't know that already. And then organizing your resources to make sure that your vision is feasible. And if not, get to a feasible direction to go to. And then make that feasible vision or path resilient. and then optimize. And, and I think of Roth conversion strategies, or optimization is all the bling of planning financially. Oftentimes, and this is why we're talking about this is, and I think this is the part of the chapter, is market forecasts, investment products become the thing rather than put in their place. So the cool stuff is what we want to look at. And the more clutter we have, it's easier to ignore all the other stuff, the important stuff.
Yeah, so we'll go back to the top of your funnel, as I understand your model, the top of your funnel there, and figuring out what you want. Even that thing, which seems so fundamental and seems so basic for many of us, can be deeply, deeply obfuscated, obscured, made cloudy by focusing on the wrong things. Like, when I'm sure you've had this experience, a lot of times when we're talking to someone about their financial goals, what we get is something that's deeply mimetic, which is to say it's a meme, right? Their neighbor got a boat, so now they want a boat. Their brother-in-law sold a business for 5 million, so now they want to sell theirs for 6 million. And so I think that paying attention to these things that are on the periphery can actually lead us to misapprehend that very first step in your process, because we're so wired to herd. We're wired to work together, which is lovely. It allows us to form communities and churches and governments and lots of wonderful things. But it also tends to lead us to look to each other to try and figure out what we want. And that's not always the right way to do it.
And so when we're thinking about what we want, what you're saying is it becomes a comparative game because we're seeing what other people have, and then that refines the aperture of our vision rather than coming from within.
I love it. The aperture of our vision. I love it. That's perfectly said.
Okay. It's hard to get out of that, right? That's one thing with nature and meditation, is the idea of getting out of that.
So, it's next to impossible. You could argue, smarter people than me have argued that it is the thing that separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom, is the ability to cooperate. We're not fast. We don't have sharp teeth. We don't have thick fur or scales. The only thing that we are good at, the reason that we're at the top of the food chain, is because we work together. And part of working together is deeply empathizing with each other, but also benchmarking to each other, looking to each other and sort of indexing our needs and wants and desires to the next person's needs, wants, desires. And that can lead us profoundly astray if we're not careful.
I want to go through the questions that you pose in the book to filter, should I pay attention to this? But before I do that, I want to pull a little bit more on this thread. In our practice, we've leaned in, before you even get to the beginning step of vision is to establish your top 10 values. And the idea is that whatever your vision is that become goals should be a reflection of you living out your values. They should be in congruence, right? They're an output of your values. I don't know if you've ever done an exercise like that. How difficult is it to come out with your values? Because even on our values worksheet, I think about it, we have all these words that they can choose from. So it's sort of giving them words rather than letting them just develop themselves. So it's not, what was that word you used about memes?
Oh, mimetic.
Mimetic. That's a good word. Okay.
Yeah, mimetic. Yeah, there's it's super hard. I have a couple of chapters on values in the book, and I don't think I included the actual list. I think I just mention it and point to James Clear, the best-selling author, has a great list of values. Roger has a great list of values. But one of the things that we find is there's often a lot of daylight between our stated values and our actual values. I think we can sort of be self-serving in even the way that we talk about our values. And I talk in the book about how the way that you spend your money is in some respects the ultimate reflection of your values. And maybe they aren't what you would like them to be, because I think plenty of folks say they value self-growth, but they're not spending money on coaching or therapy. And I think many people say they value spirituality, but they're not being very generous with their faith community. There's people who value fitness, but spend a lot more money on McDonald's than personal trainers. And so I actually think that looking at our budgets, looking at our Amex card every month is a decent place to go to see how we're living out our values, and recognizing if there's daylight between our stated values and our lived values, I think is a powerful exercise as well.
Because it's going to point out the incongruency, and that's going to create tension that
That's right.
you're going to have to resolve some way or not resolve. And if you don't resolve it internally, you're not going to feel as much at peace, I would imagine.
Yeah, because we could get super deep with this, but there's plenty of folks who use values to get away with bad stuff. There's plenty of folks who are excusing their workaholism. I see this very commonly. People who are excusing their workaholism by saying, well, I'm doing this for you all, like I'm doing this for my family, and being sort of a martyr about it. I think it's very, very easy to lie to yourself and sort of hide it under this, thin patina of a value. And it takes work, and it takes candor, and it takes just being brutally honest with yourself, and probably, frankly, bringing someone else in, whether that's a Roger or a therapist or a coach or someone, because it gets very easy to hide behind our purported values as well.
The way I see that presented in retirement planning is that, like, one of my top 10 values is adventure. And so I use that that helped in the purchase of this home in Colorado. It helps. I'm doing a 7-day wilderness expedition next year. It helps me say I have to have those on my list in order to feel congruent with who I am. But the way I see so that's a healthy way. I think I'm doing this in a healthy way. But the way that I see it presented unhealthy is I value family, and then I use that value as a justification to go buy an RV or something that's not really well thought out, right? I'm buying the image, and the purchase temporarily takes away that tension, but now you created a whole nother issue if it wasn't feasible and if it was the wrong representation of the value. Wow, you always go deep, Daniel. This is life.
And you talk to a shrink, you're gonna get the deep and the dark stuff.
All right. So let's table that, because I'm not laying on a couch at the moment. Let's talk about, and I think the big point I want to bring out is we have to know what to pay attention to when it comes to practical planning, so we don't spend 20 hours focusing on our Social Security decision when we haven't made our plan resilient in the first place. What are those filtering questions? And before I go there, I just randomly thought of this story that I've used and think about often, of that airline. I think it was an Eastern Airlines flight in Florida back in '73. They use it in pilot training now, where the plane crashed because the pilot, the co-pilot, and the navigator got fixated on focusing on the wrong thing. Basically a light that wasn't supposed to be on, and someone inadvertently took off the autopilot, and they were so paying attention to what they shouldn't have been paying attention to that they ended up crashing the plane. So when we think about Roth, when I'm on social media or someone's on social media, you need to be doing Roth conversions right now. You need to worry about this. You need to use this investment product because of this, that, and the other thing. Let's go over the filtering questions that you outline in your book. And I can just read them, and you can comment on them, or you can read them, either way.
Sure. Either way, I've got them here. You can read them.
Okay.
Whatever's easy.
So the first one is, ask yourself, do you have a reason to believe the accuracy of this information? Question one.
Okay. So the real quick aside, this whole concept came to me when I started my career before I sold my soul to Wall Street. I started my career as a clinician, and the first place I ever worked was in an eating disorder treatment center. And the very first thing they taught these mostly young women who came into this eating disorder treatment center wasn't about nutrition, wasn't about therapy, it wasn't any of these things. The first thing that they taught them to do was to be an informed consumer of the marketing messages that they were receiving every day, and the way that airbrushing worked and starvation diets worked and all these things worked so that marketers could sell you a vision that you weren't enough or that you were flawed or that you needed to buy their, lipstick or their clothes or whatever it was to feel better about yourself. And I felt like that was such an empowering thing. And one of the things that we see out there in the world is that we just don't really have reason to believe what the person on, what the man on the screen is telling us. I was at the gym the other day. I was watching an unnamed cable financial news program, and it was before the election, and they were talking about who was going to win. And the person that they had on to talk about the economy and who they thought would win was a professional wrestler. And I'm talking about like WWE, like WWE, like the fake wrestling. And we live in a world of bite-sized truths and sound bites and TikTok and Twitter and the next thing. And the truth about money, the truth about life is seldom binary, it's seldom pithy, it's seldom short. It's usually kind of complicated, it's usually kind of boring. And the people who know about it often went to a lot of school and aren't as good at positioning it as a Kardashian or a wrestler. So I think we have to ask ourselves, is the person that is giving me this advice even expert to give it?
Good question. And we'll have a list of these questions in our 6-Shot Saturday email that will help you build a filter as you're doing your retirement planning. Second question is, ask yourself, this is an important one in our industry, I think, what is the motivation of the person giving the forecast or information?
Yeah. So if you show me a person's motivations, or especially the way that they are compensated, I can also almost perfectly predict their behavior. I tell a story in another one of my books when I was going on a cable financial news program and I had the little clear earpiece in my ear, and you hear what's going on the TV, right? You hear what's happening live, but you also have a producer in your ear kind of counting you down and telling you you're about to go on. And on this day, Roger, I was, today I'm wearing a casual shrink classic of a cardigan. But on this day, I was in all of my shrink finery. So like a tweed suit, a bow tie, tortoiseshell glasses, elbow patches. I mean, just the whole, I've really bought into this life. And the producer is counting me down 5, 4, 3. And she says to me, as we're approaching 1, 2, 1, give me something good. Don't be a nerd.
Puts you in a good mindset, doesn't it?
So first of all, tough but fair. First of all, I mean, I did look like a nerd, so I can see where she got that. But if she were purely motivated, right? Like if she were motivated by the best interests of her viewers, she would have said something like, hey, please give me evidence-based, research-backed, empirically validated insights into investing. But that's not what she said. She said, don't be a nerd, give me something good, because she's not selling financial advice. She's selling sizzle and she's selling ad space. And the way to do that is to have me come on and say something wild, to say something bombastic. That's how the sausage gets made. So most of the people, all of the people, from whom you would receive some sort of message about your retirement, about your finances, have some sort of motivation, whether it's fame or notoriety or personal gain or just cash money. Everybody is selling something. And so it always makes sense to say, okay, what are this person's motivations? And look, the fact that they have motivations is not a problem.
No.
Like we all work for money. We all need to eat. There's nothing wrong with having motivations or even having a profit motive, but we need to be clear on them and then talk about how they intersect with the type of advice that we're receiving.
And I think of the internet as a sales funnel at its core. Mm-hmm. The one thing that we've tried to create as a safe space in the club is you pay the tuition on an annual basis, but there's never any upsells within the club or talking about even charity. If someone's doing a charity event, we don't allow that to be posted in the club. But what I found interesting, even in that domain, to try to, isolate ourselves some from what you're talking about, is another motivation or incentive for some, and it's something that a lot of us, I don't even think realize, is let's take, I have an opinion about a certain investment strategy. So I've implemented it in my life. A lot of my motivation of preaching that, whether it's safety first or variable spending rates or whatever, is to reaffirm myself in my decision. I think that's another kind of motivation that's less commerce-based, but we do naturally as humans.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've written another book that's unpublished, right? And not The Soul of Wealth. I have a book that I'll publish at a future date that I'm still kind of working on. It's about finding meaning and purpose in life. And I was talking to a friend about it recently, and he said, well, a book like this, a book that's so meaningful, surely you can't sell it. Like you need to take this knowledge and you need to give it away. And I said, look, my time as a pro bono therapist tells me that that is exactly wrong, because the people that I had come to my club, come to my therapy couch for free, were the laziest, least engaged, most likely to no show. That which we obtain too easily, we esteem too lightly. So there's nothing wrong with someone who's creating good stuff, charging a fair price for that. I think we have to be extra careful, though, when it's our attention or our psyche that's being monetized. When someone says, hey, you give me X dollars, I give you Y product, it's a lot clearer than I think a lot of the social media and media applications, where literally what they're trying to do is get us to stick around or get mind share or get eyeball share. And a lot of times the way to do that is, kind of a hair on fire way. It's salacious.
It puts you to the edges of the emotions that are natural in us.
Yeah.
Gauge the accuracy of the information, understand the motivations behind the person delivering the information. Mm-hmm. The next filtering question is, ask yourself, will I care about this in 5 years?
Yeah, so I will illustrate this with an advisor buddy of mine does something which I think is so brilliant. I wish I had thought about this. So when clients come into his office and they're like, "Hey, Bob, I'm worried about XYZ disaster du jour, like the worry of the day." He brings out a newspaper and goes, "Yeah, things are bad. It says right here, Fed ponders rate cuts in the middle of tight environment." Read some of the headlines. And he goes, "Yeah, no, things are pretty bad. You still worried about these things?" The paper is from 5 to 10 years ago. And so what he does is he'll bring out a literal newspaper from 5 to 10 years ago and say, "Hey, are you still worried about COVID?" Right? Like March of 2020, right? Like, what were those headlines like? You still worried about that? Are you still worried about that?
Or excited about the fad du jour, right?
Sure. And I mean, COVID was legitimately a big deal. I mean, COVID in some ways is a bad example because it was far reaching and quite dangerous and other things. So there's a million examples of this. If you go back and think about what we were worried about 5 years ago, heck, 5 months ago. I mean, I can scarcely remember what we were worried about 5 months ago. There will always be something. And just know that so little of this is going to matter to you 5 years from now. And I think that's a great question, is like, will I care about this 5 years from now? The answer is almost always no, unless it's to do with a relationship.
The listeners can't see this, but I wrote this down when I was talking with a client. I like to write down words that they say. And they say, "Given the state of everything," was sort of the preface. And then on to, in this case, I think it was fear. Important question. Go ahead. Did you have something else you want to say?
Yeah, it's just, but I think that given the state of everything is kind of how everyone feels all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, given the state of everything, I mean, scripture talks about this, right? War, disease, like all of this has been with the human family forever. So given the sort of like waving your hands and saying, given the state of everything, it always gets nods from people. And yet it has always been and will always be the case. And so given that that is always the case, given that the state of everything is always the state of everything, I think we have to push forward.
Yeah, a book that comes to mind that was written a long time ago. I don't know if it's been updated. Was it Rational Optimism? Mm-hmm. I think it is, that sort of gives some perspective on how good things actually are, because when you're on the ground, you can't see it. The last question, and I think this is even the order of the questions. Will I think about this for will I care about this in 5 years, is ask yourself, does this matter to my finances or my soul?
Right. Yeah. I think we optimize for the wrong things sometimes. We try to optimize for every incremental dollar. We try to optimize for never losing money. And I think a lot of us give away a lot of life in the pursuit of that incremental dollar. And so that minute you spent worrying about, what the Fed was going to do, or who was going to win the election, or what the new year would bring in Q1, that minute could have been better spent worrying about how to get closer with your grandkids, or how to leave a charitable legacy, or how to get better at guitar, or, a million things, how to get in shape. I think so little of what we worry about financially matters, and we'd be a lot better off worrying about how it impacts who we are more fundamentally.
One way that I see that presented a lot, I'll share two on the financial side. The optimization side of things, and optimizing for the finances, in some sense, is a sense of it's a grasp at a sense of agency, because we live in a world of uncertainty, and uncertainty is what's the Phil Stutz quote? My favorite quote is, you will never be exonerated from uncertainty, pain, or the need to do work. And all of our attempts to get exonerated from those things it's easy to do when you're at work, right? At work, it's easier than raising a family, or, dealing with family situations. And in the planning, two planning examples real quickly. Roth conversions is a good example of Roth conversions is an optimization, enhancing a plan that's already feasible and resilient. The answer is it should not have an impact on your actual life. It's just an accoutrement to enhance the journey. You should still have a great life either way. But we make it such a big decision. The other one is Social Security. Now, that can be a very big decision for some. But Dan, I've had two client instances I can think of this year because of their fundedness. They were so overfunded. And they came to me, I know we're planning on taking it at 70, but I want to take it at 67 or 68 because that was their age. And after looking at it, I basically said, I don't really care. It's not that big a decision. Let's just do it and move on.
Yeah.
Because your life is more important. I think that's the filter you're trying to express here, I think.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I talk earlier in the book about when people look back on their lives, right? We're going to be dead a lot longer than we're alive. And when people look back on their lives, the concept of money and work only comes up once. And it comes up in the negative, and people say, I wish I hadn't worked so much and worried about money so much, which is wild. So people with 20/20, lucidity about what matters in life just really don't care about work and money all that much. And yet, here in a couple of weeks, when we all go on diets and set goals to be when we all set goals to be supermen and superwomen here in 2 weeks, money is going to be the number one topic. So it's not nothing, right? I mean, you and I work in this world. It's not nothing. It's important even. But I think it can become a red herring. And, you talked about, that was a beautiful quote about uncertainty. I'm in deep agreement with it. And I think a lot of times we focus on money to the exclusion of life because money's a lot cleaner. it's a lot cleaner for me to worry about the financial trade-offs of taking Social Security at this age versus that age than to wonder if my kid loves me. Right? It's a lot cleaner for me to try and make that incremental dollar by working a couple hours more at work or getting some kudos from my boss than it is for me to worry about, have I done any good in the world today? Have I left a creative legacy? What have I done with this life of mine? So in a lot of ways, money is clean, money is certain in some respects. And so again, I think a lot of people go there to try and avoid the messiness of life, but the messiness of life is a hell of a lot more rewarding as well. So it's a trade-off.
Learning what to ignore. We just spent 30 minutes talking about one chapter. This is good for your soul, as is talking to you, Dan. Thank you.
Well, you're a wonderful human. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, now it's time to talk about energy. You got to have the energy to show up for your retirement. And to help us with that is Dr. Bobby DuBois. Bobby, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Excited as always to have another one of our dialogues.
Okay, I feel like this is a fatherly moment for me, Bobby.
Now I'm worried. We didn't prep on this issue.
No, see, Bobby can't handle. Well, he can handle. He's learning to handle randomness coming at him.
Exactly.
And in this case, I feel like the mentor, father, whatever. And it's really been cool to see you blossom with this topic and serving people speaking directly to people that are dealing with life, and your podcast and what we're going to talk about today. It's been very cool to see you lean into something that's really important to you. And I know it is. So bravo, buddy.
Thanks, Dad.
All right. So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, what we're going to talk about today is something I'm passionate about a lot of things, but I'm particularly passionate about this topic. So over the last year and a half, I guess, since we've been doing these, we've talked a lot about what exercise should we do? What's the data on sleep and its importance? What can we do to improve our sleep? And today I thought we'd switch from the what to the how. And this is a critical topic because how we approach our health is critical, or the what's don't matter because we may not pursue things. So it may sound a little esoteric right now, but hopefully it'll become clearer as we dialogue.
I think this is a good segue and growth because there's so much information on what we need to think about, all the different ways to think about it. But what do you mean by how?
So in working with folks over the decades, it's obvious we're all kind of different. We're different people, but yet the field of longevity and wellness is often a one size fits all. Everybody should eat this diet. Everybody should cut down on their alcohol. Everybody should do this. But in reality, we haven't made the progress we'd like, in part because the one size fits all doesn't actually reflect our personality types. And this is where the how comes in. How much do each of us focus on health? Some it's front and center, some it's not. How things motivate us is not the same one person to another. How we get stuck in the decision-making process or the continuing process. How do we react to illness? All these things differ amongst us. And it became very clear looking at my family. So, start at home is the kind of the adage. So I've lived with my siblings forever, and I've realized, wait a second, we have the same genetics, not exactly, but similar genetics. We grew up in the same environment, and we actually all had a very important event in our life, which was my dad getting ill when we were quite young. So we had the same kind of trigger. And we all kind of focus on health, but we focus on it in such completely different ways. I became a doctor, and health is front and center for me and everything I can do. My brother, he's kind of a single focus. He's a runner and he's really good at that, but he doesn't think about all the other, pillars or aspects that we might deal with. My older sister, life's important. And if health fits in and exercise fits in, great. And if it doesn't, well, it doesn't. And then my younger sister, she gets overwhelmed. She's motivated to do stuff, but she gets lost in the data and gets confused and doesn't know which way to head. And this made me realize that there are different health types and they all exist in my family and my friends, and that maybe this could be more broadly applicable and help motivate people, guide people, support people, because we're all different.
Right before you and I hopped on here to have this discussion, a quote popped up in my Readwise, which captures quotes from books that I've read that I've highlighted in Kindle. And I can't find my Kindle, by the way. One was from Cryptonomicon by Neal Stephenson, and I may paraphrase because I don't have it here in front of me. It was, most of us are too busy living our lives to think about longevity. And how I think that quote might apply to what you're talking about, Bobby, is we're all so busy in the rat race of life. If we don't hear the messaging that approaches us in the way that we need to hear it, these different types that you're talking about, we're going to get confused or maybe not as motivated. So what I think I'm hearing is we all have these different types, and each type has to be given information and approach it in a different way. Would that be correct?
That's absolutely correct.
It reminds me of the RISA, the RISA exam that is about retirement income awareness, where it's identifying the type of withdrawal strategy that matches the personality type. It works to, at least tease that out. These are not black and white types, but it teases that out so you can get an approach that matches your personality. So I think it really jives well with that. So what are some of the health types that you're working on identifying and communicating to?
Sure. Well, it turns out there's 5 different types, and I'll walk through each one of them in turn. And the way you figure out which type you are is there's a very simple quiz, takes a couple of minutes. You can go to my website, Dr BOBBY.Live.Long.Well.com. I suspect we can put a link in the show notes. And 550 people have already taken the quiz. So we actually have pretty good data on which types are more common and which types are more uncommon. So I'll walk through each 5 of the 5, and then we're going to dive into the type that is Roger. And then I think it'll really come to life as to how this works. Okay. So anyhow, the first one, which is what I am, and it's called a holistic health hacker. And we're the ultimate health optimizers. And the 14% of our data, that's where people fit in. So wellness is front and center for them. They have knowledge. They're always seeking kind of ways to do things, and other people seek them out. Oh, you know a lot about nutrition or exercise or going to the gym, and people, come to you and you're curious about it and you track things. You might have an Oura ring and whatever, and you thrive on sort of delving into what do we know about this or that. And your superpower is that you optimize, you tweak, you adjust to try to be as healthy as you can. Now, the downside, because we all have upsides and downsides, the downside here is you're trying to do so much, it can be exhausting. And as you get older or you retire, whatever, all of a sudden, wait a second, gravity is having an impact on my body and I'm getting a little more tired. And so for these folks, when health is so important to them, as things get tougher, they can have challenges. So, and especially if they get an injury or an illness. So that's kind of the first one.
Yeah, and some of the challenges might be the high expectations of who you are, right? And then matching that to what the aging process does. And that can be frustrating for this type, I would think.
Very much so, because they associate their self-worth being who they are a lot with their health and well-being. So, right. Okay, second one. Also minorities, this is about a 20% of folks. These are called single-minded achievers. Now, they focus on generally one or maybe 2 things. It may be, I'm really, really into exercise, but that cold plunge stuff, forget it. I'm really, really focused on losing weight, but, I don't really think about my sleep too much. So their superpower is they're laser focused. And they're very results driven, and they feel like they're really in the groove, focused on whatever it is. In essence, they have a tunnel vision. But the challenge with this group is, as we've talked, there's more than just one aspect of longevity. If you're focused on health and nutrition and weight loss, that's great. But there's all these other things like mind-body harmony and social relationships that it's really important to get these folks outside of that laser focus and realize that some other important things they may want to focus on. And they too have a problem when illness arises because they've been so focused on exercise, as an example. Now they can't exercise, and now they're depressed. And now they really don't have other avenues to boost their health and well-being.
And this,
so that's the second.
This archetype sounds like your brother, the runner, or a major bodybuilder that, for a literal bodybuilder, Arnold Schwarzenegger, like where it will develop natural imbalances because of the laser focus.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And it doesn't it doesn't have to be exercise mediated. It could be, again, as I meant, some people are really into yoga and meditation, but they lose sight of, wait a second, I guess I should do some aerobic exercise. And, there is this sauna stuff I haven't been doing. So it isn't just exercise, but they generally have one or two areas they focus on. And I'm hoping as I walk through these, people will be like, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, that's me. Okay, third. Now, this is the one you are, and it's also the most common. So 38% of the
I'm a very common guy, Bobby.
Yes, I won't
go there.
Yeah,
okay.
I won't go there. And these are called purposeful path planners. Now, these are folks who are motivated about their health. They listen to podcasts, they read, they enjoy making lists. They're very curious and they're very diligent in an effort to do better in their lives. And their superpower is that they're curious and diligent. But these folks can get overwhelmed by information. I read this thing, I'm supposed to do this. My doctor says I should do that. My friend said this was amazing. And they sort of get into analysis paralysis. Now, I should point out, these are all focused on health. But what I've found is that your strengths and Achilles heels in the health realm are exactly the same, whether it's thinking about retirement or, interacting with folks at work. We all kind of have a type. And so that's what this group is. And if you are willing, I would like to drill into your data because I looked at your actual questions and answers and had some insights.
Do you want to do that before we talk about the other two?
However you wish. Yeah. You decide. We can go through the other two.
Let's do the other two for flow purposes. Then we'll come back and fix my life.
We'll put a magnifying glass on it. Whether we fix it, that's another story. That'll be the next episode.
Okay, good.
So the fourth, and this is the second most common, is called a contentment creator. These are folks who have mastered the art of enjoying life. Life is front and center, and health and exercise has to fit in. So the holistic health hacker may put health front and center, and having fun with their family may be secondary, but these people do it the other way around. And health has to fit into their life and their life balance, or they're not going to do whatever it is we talk about. They don't stress over every new trend. They don't read a health headline and say, oh my God, I gotta focus that. They enjoy life. But these folks age just like the rest of us, and things they hadn't been paying attention to because, again, they're focused on the other aspects of their life, can sneak up on them. And what we found is for these folks, maybe they don't want to do, forget, my sister's never going to do a cold plunge. That's just never going to happen. And if she has to drive somewhere to do a sauna, that ain't going to happen. But, tweaking some aspects of her environment to sleep better, okay, that's something she might do if you approached it in a way where she's going to be willing to listen and realize it's not going to upend her life and the enjoyable parts of her life. So again, you got to pitch these things in ways that these folks will respond. Now, this is the smallest in our database. And I don't know that it's smallest in the world. I just think it's smallest in my database. Why? Because the people who took the quiz listened to me on my podcast or whatever. And so they're already interested in health. So some of these folks may be more common in the real world. They may be somewhat less common in folks that listen to podcasts and stuff like this. So these are called hopeful health seekers. And there's about 6% of the in my database that are this. Now, their superpower is they keep at it. They don't give up. But these are people who have faced failure. And I don't mean career failure or financial failure. I mean health related stuff. They've had back pain for 20 years and they just can't quite get it figured out. They've tried every diet known to man and they're overweight and they want to do something. They don't give up, but they haven't found the secret way towards health. And these people need guidance. These people need support. And most importantly, they need a win. You need to start slowly and give them the confidence that they actually can make progress because they've had decades of failure. So this is a wonderful group of people. I have them in my life, and you got to deal with them differently. If you talk to them like a holistic health hacker and like, here's the 24 things you need to do, they're going to run away and hide. And if you try to nurture a holistic health hacker, like, I know you've had troubles before, and they're going to be like, get out of here. So again, how we talk to people, motivate people, how people face challenges health-wise varies based on these types.
You got to meet people where they're at.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
All right.
So
now,
should we talk about you?
Yeah, let's fix me. Let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah. It's all about me. I mean,
come on.
That's the way
that's why I do the show, right?
That's why we do the show.
Yeah.
Okay. So the purposeful path planner is somebody who's very motivated, very, very diligent, but, can get lost in the enjoyment of finding options and information and may need some focus to make a decision. And once they made a decision, they're in a pretty good place to move forward. So I looked at your raw data, and of the 8 questions, 4 of them were straight on purposeful path planners. You answered exactly the way anyone would. But the other 4 were in other types. One was more towards a holistic health hacker, very focused, really wanting to get it done in a broad area. Other question or 2 was more like somebody who's focused on one aspect of their health. But let's drill in a little bit to the ones that really were more typified by the purposeful path planner. So
and it might be helpful too, I think, Bobby, my strategy in answering questionnaires of all types, and I've answered a million of them in my life, is I don't think a lot about it. I just react to the question, answer, and move on. So I'm not very, I think that probably reveals myself more than contemplating. So just,
I love that. That is a great way to go, because I would say half the people yell at me. It's like, well, there's no answer that's perfect for me. And I'm like, trust the approach. Just answer as best as you can. And I haven't had a single person come back and say, yeah, I hated the questions, but boy, was it right on target when it came up with the final answer and the report that comes out and all that kind of stuff. So yes, but that's very interesting that you don't obsess over it. So you're not a single-minded achiever and you're not a holistic health hacker digging into every research. So one of the questions is that sometimes you can't, holistic health hacker, their health approach can be a bit scattered. They're not as focused on 1 or 2 or 3 things. They kind of get lost and have a little bit of difficulty coming to closure and saying, these are the 3 things I'm going to work on. And that was, you answered that question in that way. I'll give you some more and then you can react to all of them. You're somebody who does research, but you're always in the back of your mind saying, is this worth it? Is this worth it? I'm just not sure. And you're ultimately trying to avoid a serious problem. That's how you answer that question. You want to stay healthy enough that something bad doesn't happen. So it's not a laser focus for you, and you may enjoy the thinking process and may have more difficulty coming to a decision. Let me pause there, and then I have another insight.
Yeah, I think is it worth it? In my mind, I would call it, when I read things, can I believe it? Or is it just faux science? And this is part of having you on the show, everybody's telling us we're supposed to do all of these different type of things. And when you read the articles, they come off as extremely believable and science-based. And from my experience, most of them aren't. And so it's less, do I feel like doing it or not? Is like, I don't want to go down a lot of rabbit holes that are just empty. I want to do the things that matter. So it's that part of it, I think, more than do I feel like doing it or not.
That makes a tremendous amount of sense. And we've talked about decisions in your own life and, for me, making decisions is second nature. I look at something, I sit back and say, okay, what am I going to do? But, for you, I know that you've made key decisions in your life and move forward, but it may take you a bit to get to that point. And, does that ring true to you?
Oh, definitely. I think there's a difference between deciding, indecisive, and undecided. And I feel like I'm a very quick decision maker, but I also think that I'm able to sit in undecided for a long period of time, which is different than indecisive.
Yeah, good point. Well, okay, so I certainly haven't told you this, but when I was out running today is when I do lots of thinking, and I was like, Roger loves frameworks. You had a whole month on decision algorithms and how you prioritize and how you make decisions. Roger loves this stuff. So he's fascinated by the decision process. And, oh, by the way, that's what he brings to the health arena as well. Yeah. So I thought, wait a second, that sounds like Roger.
Yeah. But I do get very lost in some decisions, right? If I was a decision-making machine, it's okay to be undecided as you gather information, but then you overlay the psychological, emotional fears and aspirations, that emotional level over it that gets me in my own way, which in retirement, we get in our own way a lot. The Colorado adjustment was a much more of a psychological getting out of my own way and fear and aspirations than it was a financial decision. The financial decision was relatively clear. It was more. And so from a health perspective, I think it goes the same way.
I mean, we had a discussion yesterday, which I won't talk about the specifics of, but it was very clear to me. You had said, oh, well, I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about that. And it was very clear to me what the decision was, what I thought the right decision was. But you were, stewing is a negative word, but you were in the midst of it. Whereas for me, it was so obvious. But, we're different types.
We're different types. And the other part, I think, when it comes to health and guidance is we're in our own bottle. We have zero perspective, right? And that's what I do with clients and hopefully on the show is help give people perspective and then give them a path that matches their type of personality.
Exactly.
And that's what we're talking about from a health perspective. Because
these people like you need some kind of guidance. Like, okay, I'm hearing you say this, and this about your health. I think from where I sit, this is a direction you may want to seriously consider. That's what these people need. The other people need much more motivation and a lot less direction. And some people just need cheerleading. You're doing great. Just keep at it. Exactly.
And so I think that's why these archetypes or profiles are important. They're not perfect. The science isn't perfect. You're a little bit of everything in some way, but it allows you as the guide to communicate with them where they're at so they can actually see progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which you now brought us to the next topic, which is this health type. So if I took the quiz today, will it be the same, 10 years ago and 10 years from now? And the answer is it depends, but it's very likely it could change for two reasons. One is I had a cousin of mine and she's kind of winding her career down and she came out as a contentment creator. Life's for enjoyment and health's important, but it's got to fit into my life. And she said to me, if I had answered this 3 years ago when I was in the thick of my career, I would have come out as a single-minded achiever. I'm going to get my exercise in the morning before I go to work, and I'm going to get that done 5 days a week. But she said, nah, at this point in my life, things are different. So your health type may change over just the progression of life. And here's the critical one. If you get ill or get injured, your health type may change. So you may be somebody like yourself, purposeful path planner, who may, get lost in the data. But if you got injured, an illness, I suspect you would delve into the data and you would figure out the path and you'd be a single-minded achiever. So somebody who has a strength in one area may find when something hits, all of a sudden they draw upon other areas. So the holistic health hacker who sort of had it all dialed in and now is told they have cancer and, oh, by the way, you're not likely to be able to exercise like you did for quite a long time, they may fall apart and no longer be a holistic health hacker. They may be,
if I can't be the best, forget it.
What's that?
If I can't be the best, then what's the point?
Yeah, they get lost and they need, again, the doctor you want for that person is to know where you've come from, which is somebody who is very focused on their health, realizes you're in a position of lack of control now that you have this serious illness, and you need more guidance than ever before. And you'll hopefully have a doctor who can treat you that way, which is unique to you.
In my head, as a purposeful path planner, which is a new tongue twister, I aspire to live with the same intentionality that I would have if I had cancer. I aspire, because I saw this with my mom and I've seen it with others. When this happens, cancer or some other illness, that hyper focus comes into play, the research, looking for agency wherever you can find it. I think there's a lot of healthy aspects of that, but it's like the goal is, I have a coin around here, memento mori, is to live like you're going to die right now. And that's the issue with life is we all, even though intellectually we know we are going to die and we will have illness, intellectually we know that, but we don't live that way. We live as if we're going to live forever. It's just sort of the I don't know if it's a curse or whatever, but that's interesting.
I had an example last night. My mom, who's 95 years old and is coming to Thanksgiving at our ranch, so she has to get on an airplane along with a bunch of other people. Very strong woman, take charge, plan, tell everybody else what to do. First time in her life, first time in her life, it wasn't that she called me, but first time in her life, she called me last night and she said, I'm having cold feet about coming to Thanksgiving. And it was very clear she was scared that for the first time in her life, she wasn't in control. She had to depend upon other people, and her strengths of who she was are falling away. And obviously the way I needed to deal with that situation is not as she used to be, but as she was right now. And she needed reassurance that, her oldest daughter will be there, her caregiver will be there. There'll be people throughout the process that are wanting to take care of her, and she can let go and she can do it. That was a new mother that I had not really ever seen before. So her health type and her type changed as she has aged.
And that's the point of this exercise, is to start to not define it in cement, but to identify. And I think that's the point of the quiz, because your plan, I understand, is to, as people identify, start to provide information on actions based on the type of person they are. So that way they can gain more progress in their health.
Yeah, I'm finding that this kind of construct is applicable everywhere. I mean, I just did a podcast, came out this week, on reading health headlines. It was sort of built on what we did at the roundup with our breakout session. And it was very clear to me that each of the 5 types is going to approach a health headline in different ways. one's going to eat it up. Like, what can I do to add to my regimen? Another is going to be like, don't bother me with the facts and don't bother me. I don't want anything else in my regimen. And others will be like, I'm so darn confused. The headline said this, but another headline said something opposite. And I just realized that it applies everywhere. And it applies, I suspect, to the financial decisions we need to make and everything else. So yeah, I'm excited. I hope people are motivated to take the quiz and give me feedback and help guide me to show how I can help you with sharing of information.
We will have links to Bobby's website and the quiz and our 6-Shot Saturday email. It'll be in the show notes, so you can check that out and start to identify how to improve your health journey. Thanks, Bobby.
You're so welcome, my purposeful path planner.
On your marks, get set.
Now it's time for a smart sprint where you can take a baby step in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. All right, in the next 7 days, I challenge you to use Dr. Crosby's focusing questions to strengthen the muscle around what things you should pay attention to and what you should ignore. I think this will be a superpower in you not just rocking your retirement plan, but rocking retirement. All right, thanks for hanging out with me today. I am back in my Fort Worth HQ, so I have my grandfather's journal, and I'm going to continue at the end of the show to read all of his missions that he flew in B-17s in World War II, just to get them on the record someplace other than this notebook. All right, mission number 7 and 8, July 8th, 1944, ship number 188, sortie 5th, Vienna. And was it rough? I've never seen such flack. Never thought we would ever make it through. Red Bear and I were the only ones of the crew flying. Maybe it was better that they stayed home. Target not bombed, covered by smokescreen. City of Vienna bombed instead. Enemy aircraft encountered. Escorts were P-51s and P-38s. Carried 12 500-pound bombs. Mission 7.5 hours long. Altitude 22,000 feet. Hope you are having a wonderful New Year's celebration. I like renewals. I'm not a big fan of the New Year's holiday, but I like renewals. It's going to be a great 2025. You're going to face challenges, but it's still going to be great. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.